world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Hey everybody, I'm back with the Supervillains Explored Superman Marathon. I apologize for such a long hiatus, but all that matters is that I am back. And today, I'm going to be doing a very special type of video. This is going to be the first video where instead of dedicating one video to simply one villain, I will be talking about 3. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because all 3 of these characters have such ridiculously short amounts of backstory that taking one video to explain one of their backgrounds would just be an insanely short video. So I just decided to take a cue from my good friend SlyCooper88 and just make a video talking about all 3 of them. So yeah, here's a supervillain video with 3 B-list Superman villains for the price of 1. I'm going to be talking about Bloodsport, Atomic Skull, and Silver Banshee. So let's get to it. The first character I will be talking about is Bloodsport. Now, the first character to sort of inherit the mantle of Bloodsport was an African-American man named Robert Dubois. Now, when he was young, Robert Dubois received a draft to fight in Vietnam. He considered going into Vietnam, but he was too afraid to actually join the army and go through all the training. So what happened is that his brother Mickey decided to head to Vietnam, and Robert was depressed over the fact that he wasn't brave enough to accept the draft and become a soldier himself. So he became very highly mentally unstable, and he was transported to several different Canadian mental health hospitals over the years. Now, Robert Dubois was actually found by none other than Lex Luthor, who decided that he would use Dubois to kill Superman. Now, Lex Luthor actually retrofitted Robert Dubois with a special type of harness that allowed him to fabricate any type of weapon he could possibly think of in his hand. Now, with a weapon like this, Robert Dubois actually conceived himself his own sort of vigilante, Rambo-esque action hero identity, and he became a character called Bloodsport, who, in his eyes, was a sort of an old grizzled John Rambo-esque Vietnam vet who had finally gone crazy. And he went on a killing spree, killing dozens of innocent people to draw Superman out. But when he finally confronted Superman, he summoned a gun that fired kryptonite needles and fired one directly into Superman's chest and very closely killed him. So it's safe to say that Robert Dubois has actually gotten a lot closer to killing Superman than most other villains can actually claim. The second time Bloodsport and Superman fought, Superman stopped Bloodsport by ionizing the air around his hands with heat vision, preventing Bloodsport from summoning any more weapons that he could use to fight. But at the same time, Jimmy Olsen had found Robert's brother Mickey, who was a quadriplegic, and Mickey managed to convince Robert to give up and turn himself into the police. So Robert was taken to Stryker's Island, and he shared a cell with another guy named Alex Trent, who was a white supremacist. And since Trent was a very big racist, he naturally hated Dubois simply because he was black. So Superman decided to have the two settle their differences in a boxing match. But when this happened, a riot broke out at the prison, and Dubois tried to escape, but he was gunned down, unfortunately. The second Bloodsport, Alex Trent, was born into a white supremacist organization known as the Aryan Brotherhood, which is an organization known for its radical extreme policies on hating racial minorities. And when he was born, Alex pretty much made his lifelong mission dedicated to wiping out all racial minorities and ensuring that white people become the dominant race on Earth. Pure white people, with no minorities or any genetic tampering of any type. So when he came to Metropolis, he was actually given a supply of highly advanced equipment by a demon called Bloodthirst. The most important gadget to his arsenal was a teleporter similar to the one that Robert Dubois had that allowed him to summon any type of weapon he could imagine. And he used his training and all of his equipment to go on a killing spree all throughout Metropolis, murdering countless racial minorities for a good couple of years before he ended up in Stryker's Island, sharing a cell with Robert Dubois. Now, in an ensuing fight between Trent and Dubois, Dubois managed to beat him in a fist fight, and he had him completely at his mercy. But Robert Dubois was gunned down before that could happen, so Alex Trent was murdered in his own cell by his own organization, who saw him as weak due to the fact that he had been bested by a black man. Now, my personal opinion on the Bloodsport character, I like the first Bloodsport better than the second one. Mainly because I kind of feel like Robert Dubois was a really fun, sort of interesting idea for like a B-list villain, but as far as Alex Trent goes, I don't really care much for him. I don't really care much for his whole white supremacist, Aryan Brotherhood, Ku Klux Klan thing that he has going on. To me, that just feels kind of out of place in a Superman book, but that's just my personal taste. On to the next character. Now, we're getting into one of my personal favorite lesser-known Superman baddies, and that is the Atomic Skull. Now, like Bloodsport, the Atomic Skull has had two distinct identities. The first Atomic Skull, or rather I should say the pre-crisis Atomic Skull, was a Star Labs scientist named Albert Michaels. Now, Albert Michaels was a fairly successful Star Labs scientist, but he suffered from a very rare condition with his nervous system. Frequently, his nervous system would cause him to have a ton of seizures because it had something to do with tampering with the electrical impulses in his brain. It just caused him to have a lot of seizures and breakdowns and epileptic attacks and whatnot. So he was not a very healthy guy, but he really wanted this to stop. So what he did was that he came into contact with a secret criminal organization known as Skull, which provided him with a deadly radioactive harness weapon that he could use to divert all of the pain and energy from his neural disorder into these devastating and powerful psionic sort of psychic energy blasts that he could shoot from his head. And that's how he became the Atomic Skull, because he made a costume for himself and he decided to carry out the work of the Skull organization, which brought him into a frequent amount of battles with Superman. Eventually, Albert Michaels became the leader of the Skull organization, and pretty much throughout all the rest of the pre-Crisis comics, he was just another regular bad guy for Superman to fight. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Albert Michaels. He's got some cool origins, but the character himself just comes off to me as, just another bland evil scientist character. But we're going to get into the next Atomic Skull, which is probably one of my favorite Superman villains ever, Joseph Martin. Joseph Martin was a college student who was very badly wounded when he got caught in the proximity of a massive energy bomb that was dropped by an alien race called the Dominators. Now, what happened to Joseph was that his skin was turned invisible, and he was also given radiation-based powers. But at the same time, this bomb caused him to go completely insane. He became very schizophrenic and very delusional. He believed himself to be a superhero character, a sort of movie serial character that he grew up watching as a young kid, who was called the Atomic Skull. Now, when Joseph Martin believes this is probably the main reason why he went up against Superman, because he imagined that Superman was his arch enemy, and that Lois Lane was his love interest. Now, I really love this dynamic to Joseph Martin's character, because on top of just being plain really unique, it also kind of parodies the old movie serial caricature that Superman embodies. And it sort of turns that whole idea of Superman being the perfect, perfect superhero, like, movie serial character, and just turning it on its head. I just always thought that was a really interesting part of Joseph Martin's personality. So that's really the main reason why he's my favorite Atomic Skull. Because among most of Superman's other enemies, I find him to be very unique. Now, unfortunately, during the Underworld Unleashed storyline, the demon Neron had actually made Joseph a lot more powerful, and at the same time, he cured him of his insanity, in which he went from being a very interesting and unique, insane character to being just another regular, run-of-the-mill cannon fodder villain for Superman to fight. So to me, that was kind of a very sad end to a character that I think was very cool and very different. But that's all I have to say on the matter of Atomic Skull. Joseph Martin is my favorite one, and that's it. On to the next character. The last character I will be talking about today is Siobhan McDougal, aka Silver Banshee. Her first appearance was in Action Comics number 595, and she was created by the great John Byrne. So, because of that, she's a very special character to me, so let's get into her origins. Siobhan McDougal was born into a old Gaelic, Druidic, sort of Scottish family that lived on a castle island somewhere in between Scotland and Ireland. Her father was the leader of the clan, and he rejected her for leadership because she was a woman, and he only wanted a son to inherit the leadership of the clan. So what happened was that she decided to initiate the ritual that one would usually go through in order to become the leader of the clan anyways, which involved a lot of spell casting and a lot of invoking of demons and creatures from the netherworld, which is basically an alternate hell-like dimension. So what happens is that she ends up summoning this entity called the Crone, which drags her into the netherworld, and she comes back out as the Silver Banshee. And when this happens, she becomes very power-hungry, and to fulfill her wish of becoming the most powerful netherworld demon, she needed a book of spells and incantations, kind of like the Necronomicon that her father had hidden from her. And her search for the book drew her to Metropolis, where she first met with Superman and fought with him. Now, a couple more encounters later, it turns out that Batman actually finds the book in Gotham City. Batman hands the book to Superman, who brings it to the castle where Silver Banshee was born, which is Castle Browen. Now, that would pretty much be his final confrontation with her, and what happens here is that the Crone, the demonic entity that dragged McDougal into the netherworld and brought her back as the Silver Banshee, ends up sucking both her brother, and her uncle all into the netherworld, and for a time, that was the supposed demise of Silver Banshee. But she would come back a lot later, swinging, and she would become a regular villain for not only Superman, but a good majority of other sort of magic or maybe metahuman heroes like Supergirl, Captain Marvel, etc. Now, the thing I always liked about Silver Banshee is that, other than being a character spawned from the John Byrne era of Superman comics, which you all know how I feel about John Byrne. To me, John Byrne is a living legend, and he brings absolute awesomeness to anything he touches. But I always liked her because her powers are completely magic-based, which always sort of gave her an edge over Superman. So, and the fact that she sort of comes from like a Celtic druidic clan always also makes her kind of a unique character in Superman's rogues gallery. So, there you have it, people. A video about 3 highly lesser-known B-list Superman enemies. And the reason why I did a video talking about 3 characters at once is simply because none of these characters here had a supplemental amount of backstory for me to make, a regular length video. So I just decided to improvise and simply make a video talking about all 3 of them at once. So yeah, that's my Supervillains Explored, my Supervillains Explored video on Bloodsport, Atomic Skull, and Silver Banshee. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you later. Stay tuned for more Superman villain videos. Later.